Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and in today's lesson, we're going to be teaching about how to reverence the sacred name. And the sacred name, honoring it, is one of the commandments, the third one in the Decalogue, but it says it approaches it from the negative. Thou shalt not treat thy name in vain. But even though the title we've elected presents the positive approach, reverencing, we're going to try and present the negative and the positive. So there are consequences and blessings for honoring the sacred name, inasmuch as there are cursings for failing to do so. And to begin with, the sacred name of the Father is Yahweh. And so whenever you read the word Lord in most of the Bibles you come across now, most of them in the introductions, they flat out tell you that they have altered the tetragrammaton, the YHWH, because there was no vowels in the Hebrew language, and substitute it for Lord. But they all print their versions of Deuteronomy 4:2, 12:32, Proverbs 35, and Revelation 22, 19, 18. But one must truly wonder if they have contemplated those verses and appreciated the consequences for doing what they do. So the original instance in which the name is told by the one whose name it is in response to a question from Moses. And so we're going to read Exodus 3:13, 15. And Moses said to Elohim, "See, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the Elohim of your fathers has sent me, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them?" So he knew his credibility rested upon, he had been visited in the burning bush by a theophanic manifestation of Yahweh, and he knew that the credibility of his claim rested on his ability to tell them what his name was. Now, the name of Yahweh, we read, was first proclaimed in Genesis 4:26 among the son of Seth, but since that time it had fallen into disrepute. He was known mostly by El Shaddai in the interim between Moses and the Abraham and Moses, but the name did not disappear, and Moses wrote Genesis, so he references him as such throughout the that book. But and Elohim said to Moses, "I am that which I am." And he said, "Thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you." So I am that I am translates as Yahweh, and it speaks of his eternal self-existence. And this is the answer to his question, and it's really, there's a lot of mysterious elements to the name, but for now it suffices to say that it speaks of his eternal self-existence, and there is great power in that name, as we will soon read. And the 15th verse reads, "And Elohim said further to Moses, Thus you are to say to the children of Israel, Yahweh Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my remembrance to all generations." So his name is as eternal as he is, even though there have been historical lapses in which people have failed to understand or appreciate or even know the name. It has always been and always will be his proper name, and as such, in order to fully honor the third commandment, we must call him by his proper name. And now the remembrance to all generations is echoed in the writings of Hosea, of whom we wrote in the 12th chapter, 5th verse in the book which bears his name. "Even Yahweh Elohim of hosts, Yahweh is his remembrance." And also by the psalmist in Psalm 135:13, which also more fully repeats verbatim the Exodus 3:15. And it reads, "O Yahweh, your name is forever. O Yahweh, your remembrance is to all generations." So there's an eternal aspect on his name, and it is as eternal as he is. And So we're going to return to Exodus to read what the name more extensively entails. And the first verse we're going to read is Exodus 6:6. Say therefore to the children of Israel, I am Yahweh, and I shall bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and shall deliver you from their enslavings, and shall redeem you with an outstretched arm, and with great judgments. So the fact of his deliverance and his power to do so lay at the foundation of the Decalogue as it is presented. He presents himself. The author presents himself as the one who had liberated them from bondage in Egypt, and in order to do that, he inflicted a series of judgments, which were the 10 plagues, which incidentally paralleled 10 of the pantheon of polytheistic deities in Egypt. And the next verse we're going to read is 13:9, sorry. And it shall be a sign to you on your hand, and a reminder between your eyes, that the Torah of Yahweh is to be in your mouth. For with a strong hand Yahweh has brought you out of Egypt. So this is more specifically in reference to the law of Moses, the focal point of which is the Decalogue, but the fact in his ministry of deliverance lays at the foundation of that. And the next verse is the Song of Yahweh, which was sung by Miriam, who was identified as a female prophetess. The second and third verse of the 15th chapter reads, Yah is my strength and my song, and he has become my deliverance. He is my El, and I praise him. Elohim of my father, and I exalt him. So the reason that she exalts him is because he had delivered her and everyone else, and he was a source of great strength, and praise is the righteous response to being so delivered or being so blessed by him. Yahweh is a man of battle. Yahweh is his name. So there's a militant aspect of Yahweh that is often underlooked. We tend to envision the deity one-dimensionally as exclusively at peace, but he is even though he's trying to build the bridge of peace between those who are at war with him, there is such a thing as there are limits to his mercy and forgiveness. In this we witness he is perfectly capable of wrathful retribution, and it is always righteously so. But Yahweh is his name once more, and then we're going to get to the Decalogue itself, the third commandment in the 7th verse of the 20th chapter. You do not bring the name of Yahweh your Elohim to naught, for Yahweh does not leave the one unpunished who brings his name to naught. In the King James Version, this is do not speak it in vanity, which is to bring it in disrepute or speak of it trivially or profanely. The GD word is common in our language, and that is rather unfortunate. But there may not be immediate consequences, but there will certainly be eternal consequences for all those who fail to honor the name. And by the generation of Malachi, the honoring of the sacred name and the remedy for the lack thereof was very much central to his thinking. Malachi is the the most recent Old Testament prophet. He flourished around the year 432 BM before Messiah, and Ezra had led a great revival in approximately the year 4. Ezra the priest and reformer led the revival in approximately 458 BM, and but since then the priest had succumbed to apostasy, and Malachi, as the prophet, like a lot of prophets, a lot of his target audiences for his condemnation were the priestly caste. And the first verse we're going to read from him is in the 6th verse of this first chapter. A son esteems his father, and a servant his master. And if I am the father, where is my esteem? And if I am a master, where is my fear? Said Yahweh of hosts to you priests who despise my name. But you ask, in what way have we despised your name? And we're not going to read, but to bring the name in disrepute can entail a variety of things. The priests were charged to honor and uphold the name and all the attaching requirements to honor him with proper sacrifices. They were giving them defected animals and keeping the best for themselves to eat. And the next verse we're going to read is in the 11th verse in the same chapter. For by the rising of the sun, even to its going down, my name is great among nations, and in every place incense is presented to my name, and a clean offering. For my name is great among nations, said Yahweh of hosts. Now in other versions, this is nations is translated as Gentiles, and this was the entire purpose for which the Israelite nation was created, as we witness in the dawn of the Abrahamic promise in Genesis 2:3, that all nations in the world through you shall be blessed. So their entire purpose was evangelical, yet they had to cultivate the delicate balance of being separate from the world while also witnessing to their unique deity, who was in all likelihood treated as a national deity, but they knew him as the universal creator of the heaven and earth. Sadly, the Israelites failed in their evangelical duties, largely because they harbored the separatist doctrine to such an extreme that they became ultimately unconcerned about the nations to whom they were charged to witness to. But the evangelical mandate was more or less fully fulfilled by the Christians. And the next verse we're going to read is the second of the second chapter. If you do not hear, and if you do not take it to heart, to give esteem to my name, said Yahweh of hosts, I shall send a curse upon you, and I shall curse your blessings. And indeed, I have cursed them, because you do not take it to heart. So these priests were treating trivially that which is most significant, and they merited the curses and the consequences for bringing the name into disrepute. And they may have given him lip service and spoken his correct name, but their actions, they were in possibly all talk, no action priest. And the next verses we're going to read are the 4th and 5th ones of the same chapter. And you shall know that I have sent the command to you, as being my covenant with Levi, said Yahweh of hosts. So the tribe of Levi, the Levites, were charged to perform the priestly functions and duties, and that was because Moses hailed from their class. So the first high priest was his brother Aaron, and all of the tribe were delegated the duties of priesthood. And in Leviticus 22, we read somewhere in there we read that they were to honor and hallow his name, and because he was the one who hallowed them. And the 5th verse reads, my covenant with him was life and peace, and I gave them to him into fear, and he feared me and stood in awe of my name. So the implicit inference is that what was originally upheld and honored and reverenced and treated with proper respect had since then fallen into disrepute, and as recently as 458 BM, which was a little over 20 years before the writing of this, there had been a revival of sorts under Ezra, as we have already discussed. And the next verse we're going to read from Malachi is 3:16. Then shall those who fear Yahweh speak to one another, and Yahweh listen and hear, and a book of remembrance be written before him of those who fear Yahweh and those who think upon his name. So the dichotomy of judgment, being spared from the judgment and being exalted into salvation, exalted and uplifted to heaven, versus the book of remembrance is the book which records all the names of all the people who have ever lived and determines their eternal destiny. So those who honor and fear Yahweh and think upon his name, the name itself is a wellspring of contemplation, as I hope I have proven and will continue to prove as this discourse unfolds. And the final verse we're going to read from him is the 2nd of the 4th chapter. But to you who fear my name, the brilliance of righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings. And you shall go out and leap for joy, like calves from the stall. So the brilliance of righteousness is alternately translated as son of righteousness, and this is an allusion to the Messiah. So from the first chapter of Genesis, in the 26th verse, we read the plurality of the pronoun us and we, and all the way to the final chapter of Malachi, the Messiah is very much present, though not explicitly so, throughout the Old Testament. And we're going to touch on him, or if we have enough time, we're going to touch on his contribution and his the honor of his name that we are owed. And but before we do that, we're going to hop to Proverbs 18:10, which Solomon writes, "The name of Yahweh is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe." So it is a source of safety and security. Those who honor and uphold it can be counted on the blessings and the protection from the calamities of life that those who bring it into disrepute fully and frankly merit. And Isaiah 57:15 speaks of the one who dwells in eternity, and his name is sacred. And because he dwells in eternity, he invites us to eternity, but we must meet his standards and expectations in order to inhabit that blessed abode. For thus declares the high and exalted one, who dwells forever, whose name is sacred. I dwell in the high and sacred place, with him who has a bruised and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble, and to revive the hearts of bruised ones. So David Isaiah is incidentally echoing David the psalmist in Psalm 51:17. Broken heart and contrite spirit is perhaps the more familiar translation, but this connects to the passage we just read from Solomon, in that you can come as you are, and if you are repentant, he will forgive you, he will restore you, he will heal you, and you will be blessed as a result thereof. So the ultimate blessing that he offers is not in this life, but in the afterlife. We can dwell in eternity with the Eternal One. Now, we are immortal, meaning that we all have definitive points of origins or birth, but in no end, whether we make it to heaven or hell. If we make it to heaven, our resurrected bodies, our perfected bodies will give us, will be constitutionally capable of enduring eternity. But in hell, our immortal soul will linger, in not only isolated from its body, but isolated from everyone else. And now we're going to turn to the New Testament, where we read of Yahshua, whose name is erroneously translated as Jesus. This name was given to him by heretics and deceivers affiliated with the Emperor Constantine, but his true proper Hebrew name, Yahshua, translates as Yah's salvation. And little known fact, John the Baptist is a Hebrew name. Yohan translates as Yah's grace, and this is significant because names are never arbitrarily attached in the Hebrew culture, or at least the ancient Hebrew culture. So Yah's grace precedes Yah's salvation, so there was an order in which they were arranged. But in John 17:25 through 26, the prayer that the Son offers the Father, "O righteous Father, indeed the world did not know you, but I knew you, and these knew that you sent me. And I have made your name known to them, and I shall make it known, so that the love with which you loved me might be in them, and I in them." So he made the name known, and name is indelibly attached to character and nature. So he was the fullest, final, and most supreme form of revelation as a visible, tangible embodiment of the Father in heaven. It is through him that we gain the fullest expression of his essence. And now in the what is known as the Lord's Prayer, I don't like to say Lord's for reason I discussed at the beginning of the discourse, but John 17th chapter is more accurately known as the Lord's Prayer, for lack of any alternative terminology which springs to mind at the moment, but what is known as the Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6 and Luke 11 is more accurately the disciples' prayer. For example, the Master, the Lord, would not need to ask for forgiveness as he was sinless. So we're going to be reading from Luke's account, the second verse of the 11th chapter. And he said to them, "When you pray, say, Our Father in the heavens, let your name be sacred. Let your reign come. Let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." So our prayers must not never be about us, but always be concentrated on the Father, who can bring our every righteous request to pass. And so it begins with his name, his kingdom, his will, and we are instructed to pray in the name of the Son, so we conclude our prayers in his name, but we offer them to the Father and through the Spirit. And Philippians 2, 9, 11 speaks of the exaltation which was given to the Son who honored his Father's name accordingly. And it reads, "Yahweh, therefore, has highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every other name." So the name, it transcends and supersedes any name on earth at any place in time. "That at the name of Yahshua every knee should bow, of those in the heavens and those on earth and those under the earth, and every tongue should confess that Yahshua Messiah is Master, to the esteem of Yahweh the Father." So how we treat the Son is very much reflective of how we treat the Father. But whether we can voluntarily confess the name now, or we will be coerced by the overwhelming evidence that he was who he was and was who he said he was, when he comes at the second coming, and all and the heavens and the earth and even those under the earth will come to the quite often sudden realization that he meant business, he was serious, and they probably should have treated him seriously. And the final verse we're going to conclude with is Acts 4:12, which reads, "And there is no salvation in anyone else, for there is no other name under the heavens given among men by which we need to be saved." So this is a controversial claim. He is our exclusive access point to salvation, and there is no other. So we have the outlines and instructions of how to attain that blessed abode, and one of the overlooked commandments is the third one of the Decalogue. So I'm glad you're here, and stay tuned till next time. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.